Okay, we're ready for our panel. We are going to be talking about tackling the future, strategies for tackling the future for MedTech. So I'd like to invite up Mark Duval, who is the CEO and president of Duval and Associates, Carolyn Guthrie, who is the vice president of regulatory affairs for Capstone Medical, Mark Swanson from QRX Partners, and Sat Ketkar from Valenti. Just come on over. Yeah, this would be great. No, anywhere is fine. Yeah. So we have 2 mics. We're going to be sharing, and so I can share with Mark, and I guess if you guys want to share, great. All right, so one of the first things I guess we should talk about is who you all are. So do you mind just giving just a brief introduction and maybe a 1 to 2 minute origin story? I'll let you go first.
Origin story, that sounds interesting. How far back do you want to go on that one? I'm Mark Duval, President and CEO of Duval and Associates. We're a boutique regulatory law firm, and we have biomedical engineers as well as lawyers. There's one of our lawyers out there, Brian, one of our vice presidents. We, on the spectrum, let me just maybe by way of background, I was general counsel of 3M's pharmaceutical business, drug delivery systems business, and then I worked with 3 of their medical device divisions. Over a 15-year career with one in Europe, head of the healthcare lawyers. Came back, and I had been recruited to Medtronic for about 5 years, became their head FDA and compliance lawyer for a couple of years, and I got this bright idea with a couple of kids in college and one in junior high that maybe I should go off on my own and start a firm, so I did that. And it's been a successful boutique firm, but we've stayed small. I always tell Brian it's because I'm not a good manager. I'm a player coach. I like to mentor, and we have a very intense practice with FDA. So at one end of the spectrum, we do sales and marketing counseling, put together compliance programs, teach at national sales meetings, teach the board, C-suite team, middle management. And on the other end of the spectrum, we're doing a lot of submission work. We do a lot of pre-subs. We do a lot of negotiating of 510Ks and de novos. I'm in the middle of 2 de novo appeals as we speak this week, and then PMAs. And our stock and trade is our relationships with the agency. We're with them all the time, and et cetera. In the middle, we're doing a lot of stuff with FDA investigators when they come to the plant and they hassle you. We try and keep them on the straight and narrow. So, does that help? Okay.
All right, my name is Carolyn Guthrie. I'm with Capstone Medical, which is a sort of soup to nuts product development team or company. So we do consulting, engineering, quality, regulatory, IP, and manufacturing. So really beginning to end. On my side, though, I am less on the law side of things and more on the very technical side of quality and regulatory. So my background is in the sciences. Sort of really developed from there. And I always say no one chooses quality, but quality chooses you, and that's what happened to me. I kind of fell into it when I came to the States. I'm from South Africa, and I was offered a job in business development. And when I got here, it became, well, we need you to build our quality system and help us with a 510K. So that's what I did, and I never stopped. So I've been through, this is my 20th year in the med device industry, and it's been covering a lot of different technologies and parts of the industry. IVDs and orthopedics is probably what Capstone focuses most on, but we've touched recently, as you will all know, on software and the changes there. Yeah, so that's pretty much me. Oh, and yeah, my origin story. So, as I say, no one chooses quality and regulatory, but I don't know if you all remember the movie Lorenzo's Oil. Way back when, and that's what started me on my science track, at least. I was like, I want to be involved in research. I didn't want to be involved in research once I'd been involved in research because I didn't want to be stuck in a lab somewhere. So that's how I sort of ended up doing a business degree after that and sort of got onto this track. So that's me.
Oh. I have my own. I might pass it off to you here. So I'm Mark Swanson. I'm one of the partners at QRX Partners is Quality and Regulatory Expert Partners. We focus on the quality and regulatory pieces, understanding what the agency needs for your regulatory submissions as well as your quality management systems. So I started with a small little company called Medtronic back in 2000 or so. I started, and maybe some similar stories. I was an electrical engineer, and so I wanted to design stuff. So I started in design assurance. Sounded like I was going to do R&D, so that's what I did until one of the many layoffs happened at Medtronic, and my boss got laid off, and I was still there. And so then it was like, you got to take over the manufacturing operations. And oh, by the way, we need some help in supplier quality. And oh, by the way, when you get done that in your spare time, you can do some complaint handling and post-market stuff. And so just continued to grow that. I tell my clients all the time, I feel pretty blessed because if it's a medical device, I've pretty much touched it in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a diagnostic, combination product, tissue products, all of those things I've had some experience with, and so we try to bring that to our partners. And so we're built kind of like Mark's firm in that we have other consultants that we partner with. And so we go out and meet with the clients and understand what they need, and bring that in. And Christina is with us here from QRX, our account manager. Unfortunately, Steve and Jackie couldn't make it tonight because they're off auditing and some of the things that we do. So it's been a good journey and learning. What goes on, and through that I had the opportunity to sit on the ISO committees. So ISO TC 210, which is ISO 1345 standard, 14971, and several of other standards, and got involved in the ISO process. Through that became the liaison to TC 176, which is ISO 9000, 9001. So I sit on those committees as well. And then most recently also on TC 262, which is risk management, and getting involved with all of those pieces and the discussion about why risk can't be the effect of uncertainty. And we need to have a better definition than that because it's way too nebulous. Those types of things. So if you have any questions about that, and I was joking with some other people earlier, we all in the industry said, well, when they wrote this in the standard, they were idiots. I'm now part of the they. And so if you have any questions on that, feel free to, we'll hopefully touch on some of that.
I'll keep it brief. Sat Kekhar, I'm from Valentium. I'm the Director of Systems Engineering. My origin story is slightly different. I've got over 25 years of experience, but I started out as an engineer in testing in oil and gas. Being in Houston, Texas, where we're based, you touch oil and gas at some point. Transitioned from there over to NASA and doing some aerospace. Learned a lot about safety critical systems and systems of systems, and fell in love with just systems. Met my wife, who's a biomedical engineer, and she's like, hey, you've got a knack for stuff that's safety critical. Why don't you take a look at medical device? I was like, well, we do a lot of sensors that touch the body, and they do a lot of stuff. It's very similar. Let me take a look at it. Reached out to one of my professors. He's like, yeah, no, we did some work for a local company. Why don't you go reach out to them? That was Cyberonics. And that's how I started back about 15 years ago, and just stuck with that. And again, it was one of those things where quality is not something that you go towards, but it finds you. And there was a lot of very talented people that left. There's a vacuum, and it was, hey, who knows how to do this? You. Can you help us? And it just kind of went from there. I left industry for a few years, went to British Standards Institute as a subject matter expert product reviewer. I was also on standards committees. I'm still on quite a few IEEE committees. I'm also on the Bluetooth special interest group as well. And happy to be here.
Fantastic. I think Carolyn wins that round with the line, quality finds you, so be sure and put that in your notes. Let's go ahead and get started with some questions. So when I look at companies, medical device companies especially, you look at something, they have to meet safety, they have to be legal, and they have to be profitable because money is the air, companies breathe, so that's one you can't leave out. Those are different perspectives. Each one of those sometimes you feel like there should be some overlap from safety and legal, but they're different perspectives. So I'd kind of like to explore a little bit from each one of your backgrounds. It's a little bit different, what your thoughts are on how to make that perspective share that perspective across departments and to have kind of a shared and unified goal for a company? What advice would you have for companies kind of in that realm? Any thoughts? Sat, do you want to start?
Not sure about the legal side of it. I mean, you have to be safe, right? I mean, that's probably the most important thing, right? It's patient safety, right? We at Valentum, we try to get all our engineers to have at least some level of awareness of what that means, right? There's different, people think of safety as many different things. I don't want somebody to fall on me and hurt me. That's a different type of safety than your therapy could kill someone, right? It's a very different realm of safety, right? Or incorrect therapy could ruin their quality of life, right? That's a different level of safety, right? So to get the engineers and get our staff to kind of understand that, right? And then what do you do about it, right? What do you do about it from an engineering perspective? That's where the standards come in to help you, right? To say, hey, this is what we do as a process to achieve that level of safety. At the same time, finding the balance of letting the engineers do what they do, be creative and come up with the unique solutions, which is what makes you profitable. Right. I don't think anybody's ever said safety made me profitable. Maybe. I don't know. I'll look to somebody else to answer that one.
Sure. So it's such a great question. I sat back and reflected on that. Have spent all those years as a general counsel, and I'd love to hear Howard's view of that because, you know, having been a CEO, a lawyer to a CEO, he would have a lot of interesting input on that. But so the way I look at it is we're integrating a lot of important things together. You know, when you look at FDA's mission statement, it's twofold, right? It's very simple, to be honest. It's, you know, it's speeding innovations to the marketplace on one hand, make sure patients enjoy the benefits of inventions that are made, versus, you know, making sure that we protect them from undue risk. The problem is in that equation with the agency, and you mentioned uncertainty, Mark. I just was debating FDA. I'm writing a couple of appeals, and we're going to be presenting to them shortly. Increasingly, the FDA is, you know, relying very heavily on their benefit risk guidance documents, which arguably don't have a whole lot of, really shouldn't have a whole lot of weight in a 510K decision because you inherit the underlying regulatory presumption that the device that you're comparing yourself to is safe and effective. But in de novo and PMA, it's a very real debate. And the FDA naturally gravitates to the most. They can't help themselves. I mean, the psychology of a regulator is that whatever you bring to them is never enough. And I mean that most sincerely because in fact, I sometimes feel like I'm a communicator, a psychologist, as well as a regulatory lawyer because I'm trying to fashion an argument that will persuade in the position, knowing the vantage point from which they're coming, which is always risk averseness. And, you know, the difference is I used to love when we could go, you know, take a product through Europe and we'd get a competent authority whose folks who had, you know, 25 to 35 years of experience and they didn't see boogeyman in every closet like a 2-year biomedical reviewer out of FDA. And that's the reality, but that's the team you're handed. So we're always fashioning strategies to overcome that. Now, no CEO I work for ever says, how can I skate through the FDA with you know, having to do little to no work. They always say, what's the right, you know, that's what the least burdensome statute is all about. Congress 3 times has instructed FDA with an original statute and 2 amendments to say, we want the minimum, this is Congress speaking to FDA, we want the minimum necessary that would allow you to make a decision for a PMA approval, a grant of a de novo, or a 510K clearance. And yet FDA often exceeds that. And when I have conversations with upper management at FDA, like Dr. Maisel, they really are trying to get review staffs to think, you know, they got to fit their decision making within the box, if you will, of these programs. The 510K program, it's a framework, right? And they're constantly wanting more. And so I see it as sort of it's an integration. I work now more with the folks in your field than ever before because I'm trying to explain how do we argue with FDA why we've met that the probable benefit exceeds the probable risks, which doesn't mean absolute assurance, it means reasonable assurance. And so that's the game we're playing all the time.
Yeah, and I can't agree with that more, Mark. It's been a long struggle, I think. And honestly, what I tell my clients is, look, I'm trying to be as least burdensome as I can be and get you through it. least burdensome approach is kind of what I keep preaching back to them too. I'm maybe a little bit of an oxymoron is that I have my MBA and being in regulatory and quality, so understanding some of the business aspects of it. Because I honestly tell people that I interface with is you have to be able to talk their language. When you're talking to the C-suite personnel, their language is the dollars. And so you have to be able to talk their language. And so what you have to understand as a quality regulatory person, you cannot affect the top line. You can't affect the revenue, how much is coming in, but you can certainly affect the bottom line and understanding how to be efficient, quick, making sure that you're not adding too much burden, all of those pieces. And so, and ATN, you appreciate this because I asked you earlier too, is that how can you say that a risk is acceptable without comparing it to the benefit? Because we talk about in 14971, it says that the organization has to determine risk acceptability. Okay, and somehow people think you can put a number to it and say that it's acceptable. And you're going to quickly find out that that's not going to happen, because in Minnesota here, and I'll give you the example, if it's snowing out and the roads are bad, I'm probably not going to drive downtown to go to dinner. I'm going to make a decision, a risk-based decision, that I'm not going to do that. And you're going to weigh the benefits, right? If my daughter's at school, that just went out the window because I know what the benefit is. I got to go get her, and she's got to get home. And it's a no-brainer now. The risk didn't change, but the benefit certainly did. And so it's those types of things that you have to think about. Now, what I'll leave you with in this kind of discussion is, often we say, in organizations we talk about the why. Why do you do this? I do this for the, the good of the patients and that kind of stuff. I would say, in some of the discussions we can have with the agency is let's change that to the who. Who do you do this for? I do it for that patient that is sick and dying in their bed to make sure that they can live a better life. It's that who that I do it for. And when we help the agency remember who they're doing it for and the patients, they start to see our point, the point of view that it's really the benefit to that patient and not that we're trying to take advantage or try to figure out how to make money, but we're trying to do it for that who that's sitting in that hospital bed.
All right, I've already forgotten your question, but that's okay. So yeah, just picking up on pieces that everyone's spoken about, and it's interesting hearing you're appealing and you're pushing from that side. You're sort of trying to influence the sort of the C-suite position. I think one of the things to maintain that level of safety and compliance and things like that is also being fast enough as an organization, as a consulting company, as an organization to adapt to what is changing. Because thanks to the gentlemen by my side here who are pushing change in regulations or in standards, we need to be fast enough to adapt to maintain that correct level of safety, compliance, and quality, but also allow innovation to take over. So, that's where I am, is adapt, and Greenlight's good at doing that. Capstone, we try and do that, is push for education, and I think it really does come down to that a lot. So outside of the regulatory submission itself or a sort of quality system implementation is education.
We'll figure out how to do this. So you all work with a lot of different companies. So I kind of want to get into a very specific question. So in the audience, the people I spoke with before we started, there were a lot of quality and regulatory professionals and a few founders, maybe of some different medical device companies. So keeping that in mind, what would you say is your top concern for the industry right now, maybe a top business concern for a medtech company? And what advice would you have for this kind of audience today? And maybe we could start with you, Mark. That Mark.
This Mark, huh? Oh boy. You think about the top things that are kind of going on in the innovation. I think we all kind of recognize maybe the AI piece. you maybe have seen some of my blogs. I talk about, is it really AI or is it just really a smart machine? Using some machine learning so that the machine can just do things a lot quicker than what we can do. But I think it's us taking advantage of those innovations that are happening. You talked about the innovation piece and pushing the envelope on what can be out there, because I think we can help people more than what we've done in the past. I think by taking advantage of those things and really pushing that innovation envelope. And the agency, to some extent, has tried to do some of these pieces in having the software office and other pieces. I think, again, what a lot of people don't recognize, I think, is the people at the agency, while they know a lot of stuff, they're not necessarily the experts. They're certainly not the technical experts on many of the things. And so it's a lot of us explaining to them why it's a good thing. And so us taking that on and making sure that we're sharing, like we're sitting up here and in other organizations, I was just at the ASQ World Conference, WCQI, and sharing the information, I think is, some of the challenges we have to take on, because we get so secretive in our innovations and those types of things. We want to take advantage of it, but I think we need to share more. And so if we can take more of that on, so.
I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago, everything was big data. Remember that? Let's get everything in the cloud. We have a lot of people here for that, and that's continued to move where now the patient, the caregiver, whoever is on the other end of the medical device now wants to know what to do with that data. Everyone wants their data. Hey, I heard that someone out there in the cloud has my data. What are they doing with that data? I want my data. But now they want to know what to do with it, as to tell me how to make my life better using my own data. And that's where the AI comes in. It's like, okay, now we have AI. It can tell me what to do with that data. So the thing we're trying to work through is, how do we close that loop? And it's going everywhere, and not just wearables or insertables, but active implantables. They want to know what is going on with my own body, and how do I do, what to do with that data. And that's a big thing for a startup or a new business to say, how do we play in that field? Because, hey, we've got IP, we've got a therapy that can make somebody's life better, or we can collect data, sense quite a few different things. What do we do with it? There are people out there looking for that. And with AI, I think it's going to get even more and more, accessible to say, oh, hey, you may have this thing, yeah. So don't be too afraid of that. Outside of that, the biggest thing that at least at Valentium we're trying to work with people is to kind of walk them away from the cliff edge that they go to when we start discussing cybersecurity. You mentioned that word, and they're ready to, and yeah, so is the agency. It's a little messy as to some of the wording in the latest guidance, and kind of confusing to some people. It's not that scary. Just like everything else, just like you're trying to do a benefit risk analysis for safety, do the exact same thing for cybersecurity. Don't worry about it. It shouldn't be that scary. We can help you with that. There's a lot of other people in this room that can help you with that. Right size that solution and make it fit within your ecosystem. So those are probably the couple of things.
All right, so challenges, and you said something that I really liked was, now I forget who said it, but it was basically that the reviewers, the lead reviewers of some of these submissions do not necessarily have the maturity of knowledge, or they're just not the subject matter experts. So there's a lot of challenge to convincing a reviewer of your evidence. And I am the queen of arguments in all sorts of areas. So that is a challenge, is have the right background or the right people in place who are representing you to the agencies, or even to your notified bodies, or to the FDA, that understand what you're trying to achieve, which is ultimately least burdensome, safe for patient use, and maintaining that product quality over time. So I'd really say a challenge is being able to present your argument coherently and effectively without having to do any additional work, any additional testing or actually developing that evidence. So so one of my personal challenges right now is definitely with reviewers and ensuring they have that right sort of capability or competency behind them for that specific device.
So that's good. That's a great answer. So let me add to that. So I think, in a sense, changes for industry don't change. They're often quite the same. It's in a newer era, and other types of products are coming out, et cetera. But to me, when Silicon Valley Bank went down and other banks followed suit, we became vitally aware of the criticality of capital once again. The pendulum, it never changed. The issues never changed. The pendulum just swings, and it can get worse or it can get better. It's gotten worse again. We have 1,264 clients we've served in the last almost 21 years, and this reminds me of about 15 years ago when capital was really critical, and here we're swinging that pendulum back. And the FDA doesn't help that, because when I present to a lot of boards on behalf, 75% of our clientele, just for disclosures, is small pre-revenue startup, and the rest are medium to large companies. And so a lot of times we're presenting to boards about the regulatory strategy, and we're often there with the person who's presenting the reimbursement strategy. Those are the two key things, of course, any medical device company wants to get a handle on, and the board will interrogate us as to what's the likelihood of us getting through, and in what time frame, and at what expense, et cetera. And when you see an agency continually mindlessly escalating data requirements, and I mean mindlessly, it gets scary, because there's some of the products that we get a lot of products that are a submission that we're starting from the scratch, but many of them are when they get stuck at FDA. And when we get a product portfolio or a product that's stuck at FDA, it's an uphill battle, and you've got to overcome. And sometimes they're making such risk-averse decisions on a very minor product that can't get through the agency for the life of them. And then you get up to upper management where common sense finally reveals itself, and they overturn the staff below. Then you know that there's still some sanity left at the agency. But why? I was at the MDMA meeting, was it 7 weeks ago, Brian, in Palo Alto, and I remember saying up at the podium talking about the De Novo program with Peter Yang, who was one of the people who runs the De Novo program within, at least programmatically, within CDRH. And I looked out at Dr. Maisel, and I said, if you don't know who Dr. Maisel, he's the director of OPEC, the Office of Product Evaluation and Quality, reports directly to Dr. Shuren, the center director, and he's in charge of all the OHTs, 1 through 7, which have all the different therapeutic segments from cardiovascular to neurological to in vitro diagnostics, et cetera. And so I remember saying to him, I said, Dr. Maisel, I just want to compliment you in front of the audience, and not to embarrass you, but I'm going to embarrass you. It's great that you are taking appeals still, and you are overturning people from time to time, because while we can't have this funnel that is, it's the Dr. Maisel funnel, not everything can go up to you for resolution. This is ridiculous. And I like the fact that when you overturn them, you've now been teaching office directors of OHTs 1 through 7 to actually overturn their staffs and not just rubber stamp their work. And then hopefully that'll go down further and further and further, so we actually get reasonable decisions that are being made by the reviewers in the first instance, because that drives a lot of capital demand for the companies. I'm facing 2 companies right now doing de novo appeals, and it's sad, because if they don't get this, if I don't overturn their decision, they're probably defunct companies. And that's a waste on both. And one of the companies, by the way, is approved, their product is approved in 72 countries for 21 years, and they've sold 700,000 units. It's distributed for the last 20 years by Medtronic and Johnson & Johnson. Did you hear what I just said? 2 of the most reputable companies in the world are distributing this product for the last 21 years, 700,000 units sold, and FDA is stuck. And they got a lot of great clinical data too, but we get into these very, very protracted and deep debates about science and what it really takes to bring them in. And that science, again, it's not in a vacuum. It has to be in a framework or a context, because the FDA has to restrain itself somehow, or everything just defaults to, well, we want a randomized controlled trial. Well, that's not, if least burdensome is synonymous with a randomized controlled trial, then we don't need the statute, because that's the most burdensome from the get-go. So, I think it's capital. I think it's the reasonableness. And Dr. Shuren just spoke recently at a conference a couple weeks ago where he actually admitted that they're trending way too conservative at the review staff level, and we need to, because it's really hurting industry at this point.
Just counter question just for you real quick. So with that being said, what kind of advice would you have somebody who is a regulatory affairs professional right now, and they come up against that, maybe they don't have the knowledge to handle that situation? What kind of advice do you have?
That's such a great question. We get it all the time. We just taught a program for 2 days in Rockville, Maryland for the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. And of course, it's all regular, so that's what our topic is. And what I was trying to teach them with Lisa Pritchard from our shop, who's a biomedical engineer, we were trying to teach them is, please don't be so deferential to the agency. That doesn't mean you don't respect them. That doesn't mean you're not diplomatic. But it means you have to learn, you have to know the law and the regulations and their own guidance well enough to challenge them, because you may have to regurgitate it back to them. So when we tell them, when you're filing a submission, what is the most key thing that you can put into that document? What would you think? Anybody have intended use? That's a good example. We would tell you executive summary. Tell them the story, right? You got to tell them the story, what your product is, where you're headed, and you got to get to. And so many regulatory affairs professionals think of this. They communicate in an upside down pyramid, triangle. They ramble, get to the point. And I want them to flip it around. Get to your point, support it with an increasingly widening base of information that tells your story. It's persuasive. And the executive summary is the most important part of a submission. Because sometimes, like we had one client, I was just telling Howard this as an anecdote, we had a client who was going to make a submission, and they already knew that they probably weren't going to, it was a big company, probably weren't going to convince FDA that it would remain on the 510K path, and they desperately wanted it to. They had just acquired this company, and they spent a lot of money for it, and they didn't have it factored in that it would be a de novo or a PMA requiring a lot more evidence. So they hired us, and I said, what I'd like to do, if you'll permit us, is to do like a cover letter. You know, I know that sounds kind of unheard of for a 510K, but we did a 12-page cover letter that argued why we had the same intended use, same technological characteristics, and didn't raise different questions of safety and effectiveness. And they had previously communicated they didn't think they met the first two of the definitional requirements. We won them over, and the rest of it became not a breeze, but it came a lot easier because we weren't fighting over that. Because here's what happens. If you don't win that threshold argument when you just make your regular submission, and then they decide that you don't have either the same intended use or same technological characteristics, or you raise different questions, that there's a level of inertia that builds up within the review team. And they circle the wagons around one another to protect that position, because it's the inaugural position, and they don't like pridefully moving from it. So try and win them over early and often.
And if I can add, because this happens all the time. We did a submission, a pre-submission asking for breakthrough designation. And if you look at the guidance, the regulation, it talks about reasonable evidence. It does not, and the reviewer and their team kept coming back with, well, you don't have scientific evidence. That's not the requirement. And we just have to keep emphasizing that back to them often, and just saying, really, read the guidance document. It tells you what the expectations are. And because one of the things it's saying is we're talking about it here, realize that the agency is experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing in industry. They've lost a lot of more experienced people.
That's the third thing I wanted to mention.
And so
Loss of talent.
The loss of talent at the agency has really affected us, and having to remind them about the who that we're doing it for, the patient, the safety and effectiveness, and what the regulations and guidance documents say, Because I'll tell you that there's many of them there that will say, well, that guidance document is 10 years old. Yeah, but it's still the current guidance. And so unless we update it or change something in there, it still is the piece. Now, that's the thing, is that when you get to the top levels, the upper levels of the agency, they're the ones that wrote most of those guidance documents, and they still believe in them. And so you have to teach the younger people, you know, this is why we do it the way we do it.
You're fine. And I love what you said about the executive summary. And that's one of the sort of top documents in a special 510K is that executive summary to explain it all. But having that argument piece, I'm a huge proponent of pre-subs because I think it's a good way of communicating. One time I decided not to because I said, this is not going to give the overall picture. I'm not doing a pre-sub. We're going straight in with that submission so they can get the whole picture one time. So absolutely, I get that. Is build your argument that way. I love that.
Anything else to add?
The only thing, I mean, you guys already all said it, but yeah, it's the level of experience and continuity, right? When I was at BSI, when Brexit happened, there was a lot of people that left, and it was a lot of the top level people that left, and there was a disconnect. I mean, the young guys coming up or young people coming up, they didn't have the history of where that regulation came from or where what the state of the art is right now. And they were protecting each other, right? So things became very conservative. And then finally they started to kind of back down, right? But given the nature of it, the way it is in Europe, it's slightly different because you can look at how the other notified bodies are looking at it, and that really levels things out a bit. Where here is just one body, right, that's looking at it.
And I'll just speak for the young people. If you think everything's black and white, talk to the people who have gray in their hand. They'll show you that there are gray areas. And so I'm really thankful to be the youngest. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Well, real quick question. We only have a few minutes left. I want to ask you a question. What do you think? You work with a lot of companies again. What would you say a best in practice company, something that just really stands out to you? What is something that stands out to you about that company that you feel like they do especially well that you think would be helpful for this audience to pass along? Seth, do you want to start us off? If not, it's okay. You can. Let's put Mark Swanson. No names.
Yeah, I mean, I could throw some of the things out there. So honestly, from a regulatory quality standpoint, those organizations that have moved forward to put their systems in the cloud and electronic systems, whether it's Greenlight Guru or any of the other ones that are out there, if you haven't moved towards electronic documentation, you are falling behind. I've done a lot of FDA inspections, and a lot of us, grew up on the paper piece and bringing the paper into the room. Somebody looks at the paper before it goes to the inspector. Those types of things. The last one that I did, because I was leading it, I did it directly in the electronic document control system. Had the screen up there, brought it up. The inspector thought that she was going to be there for 3 days. She was there for a day and a half and she was done. Because as soon as she was asking for something, I was bringing it up. Just knowing where it was and could do the search and those types of things. So yeah, I had my own screen and what she was seeing was just what I was bringing over to her, but it was just there and that fast. And so to me, that's the types of things that the best organizations are doing right now, is they've moved to an electronic system, they've moved to a system like Greenlight that has the traceability, design inputs, design outputs, your mitigations and risk management, all of the pieces that I can just see it right there on the screen and scroll across. That's what the best companies are doing.
Be flexible. I think that some of the startups we've worked on, we get it, right? Startup capital is very limited and you want to focus on your IP. But the good ones have extended themselves to go, okay, I know I'm going to need a quality person. I know I'm going to need something, somebody to do regulatory. I'm not going to try to do all that myself. I'm the engineer or I'm the scientist. I know what my specialty is. I'm going to go and find that. And then, like he said, right, just make sure you go out there and find that right tool that's going to help you make your life easier. Don't try to do it manually all by yourself. And there are companies out there that we've worked with that have come to us with that knowledge. It makes our life easier because we don't have to explain that to them. They already know, oh, I need to do this. Can you help me with this? Which is, nice to hear.
So I think it's, for me, it's when they run good teams. They have good project managers. The companies, I don't care whether they're big or small, they have somebody who's assertive, not necessarily aggressive, but assertive about getting everybody together and having an opportunity to dialogue, because we all learn from each other. Everybody's got a perspective that they're contributing, which is going to affect somebody else's discipline. So I love it when we get regulatory, clinical, marketing, and reimbursement, for example, all in the same room. And then there's the engineer. So like, if we design this out of this, or if we could improve this, that might make us, the claim that we could make, it might, we always begin with the end in mind. What is the claim that would make this product differentiable in the marketplace, and what's going to make it successful from the sales and marketing standpoint? And then we backward integrate those thoughts and discussions. And I like it when it's a well-run team who keeps things on track. And I show up when they set up a Zoom meeting and provide my input as does everybody else, and we're marching down the same track. And it's so, when it's done right, it's super efficient, and it really, I think it works well.
So totally going off of what you're saying is, yes, having the right team together, but pulling them in at the right time. It's not a case of let's get through design and development and then let's pull a regulatory in and see what they can do. It doesn't work that way, because you are going to have sort of iterations of redesign because of that. So definitely bringing people in at the right time. And then going on what you said with tools, but use the tools that the regulatory agencies are providing to you. I mean, I see emails all the time on all these different tools that the FDA are bringing in, whether it's these material safety summaries or their, just recently they put out a STP file so that 3D printing labs or companies with new 3D printers could actually test print. I think it was a spinal implant. But, just looking at guidance documents, there's guidance document after guidance document, not only on the FDA side, but the MDCG guidance documents are really helping us implement MDR. So it's, using the tools, bringing the right people in at the right time. That would be.
Fantastic. Do we have any questions from the audience? That's very convenient, because we're ready to move on to our next part. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you, for being part of the panel. We are not going to take a break. We are going to go straight into our next part, which is the live podcast. Let's go ahead and give them a round of applause. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.